When I started with photopass back in 2006, my favorite place to work with the characters was a place that's no longer there. Toontown. Here's some of my favorite memories of it. Mickey's Toontown Fair used to sit in the very back of the Magic Kingdom. They had built all these temporary buildings that were meant to be there for just a couple years, and they ended up leaving them there for over 10 years. In Toontown, there were two different places to meet the characters. The first one that most people knew about was Mickey's house. You would take a nice little tour of Mickey's house, see the decorating job that Donald and Goofy had done on a couple of the rooms, and after you went through there, then you would go to a big tent that was in the back of the house. That's where you got to meet Mickey. He was always there waiting to meet all of his visitors and his friends. Here's a little secret for you. Inside that tent, there were actually 3 different rooms. And depending upon which mood Mickey was in, he'd be in any one of those 3 rooms to meet you. But you probably never got to see that. You would only notice the one room that you were led to. Eventually, Minnie joined him over there. But she actually started in the other place to meet characters at Toontown. And that was in a place in the County Bounty. The County Bounty was a big, giant tent. There was actually a huge store in there with all sorts of stuff. Typical Disney gift shop stuff. Had a photopass station in there. But if you turned over to the right side along the entrance, that was where you get into the line to meet the characters. The County Bounty actually had 3 different rooms for characters. In those 3 rooms, each one would have 3 different spots where you get to meet different characters. And they would bring in about 15, 20 people at a time. And then they would cycle through and meet first one character and then move to the second character and then move to the third one. And we would have a photographer with each character. It was really nice because the crowds were small enough that you could manage them. You could spend a little bit of time. They could spend some time with the characters and get to know them. It also meant that you would occasionally get down times because as people were going from room to room, they may not necessarily have a chance to get you full. So you would get some occasional breaks. And those rooms would change a little bit over the years. When I first started in 2006, you had the Pooh room, which had Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, and a couple of his friends. They moved out to meet people over by his ride, and it became what was called a Pals room. Now, one of the other rooms was already a Pals room. This is where Goofy and Pluto and Donald and Minnie would all meet their friends. And they would be there, 3 people in a room, and you get to come in and meet 3 different characters at once. When they changed the Pooh room out, it became another Pals room, and it would have different characters than the other one. Again, each room having 3 different characters in it. And you may run into Daisy over there. The Chipmunks were in there pretty often. But you would also run into, say, Perla, one of the mice from Cinderella. The Mad Hatter would be there sometimes. And a big variety of other characters. So those 2 rooms with the 6 different character spots would constantly be changing who was in there. We had lots of fun with them, though. It was a nice place because they would only load in about 15, 20 people at a time. And so you could have a little bit of fun while playing with the characters and with the guests. The 3rd room was the Princess room. Now, it was a little drab when I started, and it was usually Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. And then the 3rd princess would kind of change and rotate around a little bit. Eventually, it became Belle almost all the time. They eventually did a real nice makeover of the room, and they turned it from kind of a barren-looking thing into plush curtains and drapes. You'd have canopies and padded benches, and turned it into a really pretty room. The Princess room was one of the places that you got to see some really special moments. You would see little girls in particular come in, and they're just in love and awe of the princesses. And so they'd walk up and they would hug them and just hold on and not want to let go sometimes. They would sit on the bench next to Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Belle, and you just watch these little girls just fawning over the princess, just in awe of the fact they were there. Little boys were hysterical because they're looking at these beautiful girls and they don't want to admit that they like the girls and that they're cute. And so these boys are turning red. We'll go. We would occasionally have moments too with the princesses where we would end up with the break and the music would be playing, and so it wasn't unusual for a photographer to grab a princess and dance around for just a little bit just to keep ourselves from getting bored. The other Pals room was where Donald liked to play court. One of the things it had in there on the wall was a big list of all of the Disney Toon characters. And they were all up there and you could see everybody who was there. But in making this banner, they missed one. They forgot to put Donald on it. And Donald was in there all the time. So Donald got a little upset at this, and he actually went over to the banner at one point, lifted it up, and wrote underneath it, Donald Duck number 1. So if you would look at the banner and ask Donald where he was, he'd walk over and flip the banner up and show you where he was. That Pals room, though, eventually became where the fairies met. They turned it into Fairyland, and you would actually go through a whole different line that would shrink you down to the right size to meet the fairies. And that's where Tinkerbell and Vidya and several of the others would play. I only got to work in the fairy room a couple times, but those couple times I did were so much fun. Vidya in particular was a blast because Vidya was a little bit of a snot. She was a wind fairy or an air fairy. And so it wasn't unusual for her to be able to send out a gust of wind and blow the photographer over and send him rolling. That was usually me. She liked to have a whole lot of fun. A couple of my favorite memories, in fact, are of that. My nieces, when they visited, one of the things they wanted to do was visit the fairies. Now, one of my nieces has autism, and so she sees things just a little bit differently than the rest of us do. They came into the fairy room, and my oldest niece was so excited she went running to meet Tinkerbell and the other fairies, and my youngest niece, she decided she was more interested in the plants and the decorations, and who cared about the fairies? Let's check out these big things on the wall. She had a great time doing that, though, and the fairies had a lot of fun following her around. Now, each room, of course, would have music that would play along with it. If you go to the princess room, you would have all the princess tunes. Snow White songs would play, Sleeping Beauty songs would play, Cinderella songs would play. It was just a really nice room. If you go into the Pals room, it was usually a mix of different Disney characters singing different songs. They play the same ones over at the Mickey rooms. And you get so sick of hearing Turkey in the Straw. Oh my gosh. Don't ever do Turkey in the Straw again. Now, you may remember earlier in the video, I told you that we had 3 different rooms, and they would load those rooms up with certain groups, and they would actually rotate which room they were loading up. Well, the way the rotations work sometimes, especially depending upon weather, if we had a really stormy day, you would occasionally get a time where you were waiting for a group of people to come in. And that's when we'd have a little bit of fun. Pluto in particular liked playing soccer with a ball, as long as he didn't get caught. Pluto also liked to play with shoelaces. How he did it, I don't know, but Pluto seemed to have this knack for untying shoelaces, especially when you weren't looking. Goofy fell in love with Spider-Man and would try to climb the walls. Donald was always stirring up a ruckus. When we would have Minnie and Daisy, they would typically be on opposite sides in different rooms. Well, those two are best friends, but they're also a little bit of rivals. And so it wasn't unusual for them to go back and forth between the rooms just to have a little bit of fun and tease each other. Chip and Dale, of course, were always causing trouble and making a ruckus. They would be stealing things, taking pens, throwing things across the room, doing whatever they could to cause trouble. And then when you sit there, hey, who did that? They would both be staying there going, typical, blame each other for it. But it was always so much fun because you get to see these characters meet people and interact with them and talk to them, and people would just absolutely love it. In fact, one of the best parts of being at Disney World and Disneyland is going to meet the characters. That's why in one of my next videos, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of do's and don'ts for meeting the characters, including the system the photopass set up. Be sure to keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed some of my favorite memories from Toontown. It was really one of my favorite places to work in all the parks, and I miss it a lot. I understand why they changed it and added on to Fantasyland, but I miss Toontown. It was a neat place. In case, I hope you enjoyed this. Please don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Spread the word. Leave comments below. I'd love to hear your comments, your feedback, your stories about meeting characters there. Thank you so much.